Everyone in town laughed at the quiet mountain man. His clothes were patched. His boots were worn. His hands were rough from years of honest labor. When the wealthy rancher's daughter saw him, she assumed he was just another poor drifter. But a week later, he opened the gates to a hidden estate more beautiful than anyone had imagined. What happened next changed not only her opinion, it changed her heart forever. Stay until the end, because the mountain man's greatest secret wasn't his estate. It was the reason he kept it hidden. If you enjoy heartwarming Wild West stories about kindness, humility, faith, and true love, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin. Nathan Cole lived alone in a small log cabin high in the mountains. Every week he rode into the nearby frontier town wearing the same faded coat, dusty boots, and old leather hat. He quietly sold furs, repaired broken wagons for free when families couldn't afford a blacksmith, and always shared part of his earnings with the church orphan fund. Yet no one knew much about him because Nathan never spoke about his past. Most people simply called him the poor mountain man. One warm autumn afternoon, Elizabeth Montgomery arrived from her father's wealthy cattle ranch. Elegant, educated, and accustomed to fine living, she stepped from her carriage just as Nathan was unloading supplies for an elderly widow. Seeing his worn clothes, she assumed he was merely a laborer. When their eyes met, she politely thanked him for moving her trunk without realizing he wasn't hired help. Nathan smiled kindly and said nothing. Later that afternoon, Elizabeth accidentally overheard townspeople praising Nathan for repairing an orphan's roof without accepting a single dollar. Curious, she watched him from a distance as he quietly helped strangers, chopped firewood for an elderly couple, and carried heavy sacks for the general store owner. He never asked for recognition. He simply believed kindness was a duty, not a favor. That evening, Elizabeth apologized for judging him by his appearance. Nathan only smiled. "Clothes wear out," he said gently. "Character shouldn't." His words stayed with her long after they parted. Over the following days, Elizabeth found herself looking forward to every conversation they shared. Nathan spoke little about himself, but listened carefully whenever she talked. Unlike the wealthy men who constantly boasted about land and money, he asked about her dreams instead of her family's fortune. Slowly, Elizabeth realized she admired the quiet mountain man more than any polished gentleman she had ever met. Watching from across town, however, her father, Charles Montgomery, grew concerned. He believed wealth should marry wealth and warned his daughter to stay away from the humble frontiersman. "A poor man can never give you the life you deserve," he insisted. Elizabeth wasn't so sure anymore. She had begun to suspect that the richest man in town might not be the one with the biggest ranch, but the one with the kindest heart. Unknown to everyone, Nathan carried a small brass key in his pocket, a key that unlocked a secret capable of changing everything Elizabeth believed about him. The days passed, and Elizabeth found herself visiting the little frontier town more often than necessary. Sometimes she brought books for the church children. Other times she simply hoped to meet Nathan along the dusty street. Every time they spoke, he treated her with the same quiet respect he showed everyone else. He never tried to impress her with grand words or promises. Instead, he spoke about hard work, honesty, and helping neighbors without expecting anything in return. The more Elizabeth learned about him, the more she questioned everything she had once believed about wealth. Her father, Charles Montgomery, noticed the growing friendship. "You deserve a man with land, cattle, and influence," he warned. Elizabeth answered calmly, "I deserve a man with character." Charles frowned. "Character doesn't build estates." Nathan happened to overhear those words while delivering supplies nearby, but he simply smiled and continued his work without defending himself. A few days later, a violent rainstorm swept across the valley. A wooden bridge collapsed, leaving several families stranded on the far side of the river. Without hesitation, Nathan organized the townsmen, cut fresh timber, and worked through the night rebuilding the crossing. Elizabeth watched him shoulder heavy beams beside ordinary ranch hands, while wealthy landowners stayed safely inside their homes. When dawn arrived, the bridge stood stronger than before. The grateful families crossed safely, thanking Nathan with tears in their eyes. Still, he refused every offer of payment. That evening, Elizabeth found him sitting quietly on a bench overlooking the prairie. "You never ask for anything," she said. Nathan looked toward the mountains. "My father taught me that blessings grow when they're shared." Then he stood. "Would you trust me enough to take a ride?" Curious, Elizabeth nodded. Together they rode deep into the mountains along winding trails few people knew existed. Hours later, Nathan stopped before a pair of enormous iron gates hidden beneath towering pine trees. He quietly removed a small brass key from his pocket. The gates slowly opened. Elizabeth stared in complete silence. Beyond them stretched a breathtaking valley unlike anything she had ever seen. Rolling green meadows, crystal clear streams, a magnificent stone lodge, beautiful horse barns, fruit orchards, fields of wildflowers. Dozens of hard-working families lived peacefully throughout the valley. "This," Elizabeth whispered, "belongs to you?" Nathan nodded. "My grandfather built this estate, but after my parents died, I chose to live simply. I wanted people to know my heart before they ever knew my name." Elizabeth looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You let everyone believe you were poor." Nathan smiled gently. "I've never been poor. I've always been rich, just not in the way most people understand." As they rode through the peaceful valley, children ran happily toward Nathan, calling him by name. Widows thanked him. Workers greeted him like family. He wasn't simply the owner of the estate. He quietly shared its harvests, paid fair wages, built homes for struggling families, and never sought recognition. Watching from a nearby hill, Elizabeth finally understood. The greatest secret Nathan had hidden wasn't his wealth. It was the extraordinary kindness with which he used it. But someone else had discovered the truth as well. Charles Montgomery had secretly followed them, and what he planned to do next threatened to destroy everything Nathan had spent a lifetime building. The following morning, Charles Montgomery arrived at Nathan's hidden estate with several businessmen. He looked across the beautiful valley and smiled greedily. "I'll buy this place," he said confidently. Nathan calmly shook his head. "It isn't for sale." Charles offered more money. Then even more. Nathan refused every offer. Finally, Charles laughed. "Everyone has a price." Nathan looked him straight in the eyes. "No, some things are worth more than money." Elizabeth watched silently, realizing her father still measured success by wealth while Nathan measured it by the lives he changed. Before leaving, Charles spread rumors that Nathan had gained his fortune dishonestly. Soon, curious townspeople gathered outside the estate. Instead of becoming angry, Nathan opened the gates and welcomed everyone inside. He showed them the orphan school he had built, the small medical clinic he funded, the homes he had given to widows, the fields where struggling families worked and shared the harvest together. An elderly rancher stepped forward. "When my family lost everything, Nathan gave us land without asking for a single dollar." A widow smiled through tears. "He paid for my son's education." Another man said, "I never wanted anyone to know." Silence filled the valley. For years, the richest man among them had quietly lived like the poorest. Not because he had to, but because he wanted people to value character before wealth. Charles lowered his head in shame. He walked to Nathan and quietly said, "I judged you by your clothes. I never looked at your heart." Nathan smiled kindly. "The best treasures are the ones money can never buy." Elizabeth stepped beside Nathan. "I thought you were just a poor mountain man." Nathan chuckled softly. "And now," she smiled, "now I know you're the richest man I've ever met. Not because of this estate, but because of the way you love people." Months later, under a golden prairie sunset, Nathan and Elizabeth were married in the little valley church. The celebration included ranch hands, widows, children, and neighbors from every walk of life. No one was treated as more important than anyone else. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Nathan looked over the peaceful valley he had protected for so many years. Its greatest treasure had never been its land. It had always been the kindness shared within it. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that true wealth is found in humility, generosity, and love, not in gold. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next Wild West story.